My sermon today is called Asleep in the Light. And there's something about the light that shouldn't make you go to sleep. Like, again, I defer to the medical people in the crowd, but the light should awaken your brain. I don't know the chemical processes, but melatonin or something should start switching around, right? And you should wake up in the light. But have you ever had that intense summer day and the light and the heat is just sort of draining you and you squinting up at the light and you just find yourself drifting off, maybe at the beachside, right? Or in the tanning lawn chair. I want to talk to you about a man. I want to talk to you about a man that tells us what almost can do. He's a man that I'm guessing not most of you know. I think a few of you may know of him. His name was Keith Green. Who knows Keith Green? Who knows of Keith Green? Yeah, I knew there would be a full few. I knew there'd be a full few. I call him a man who teaches us the power of almost. Okay, because Keith Green, there's no doubt this man was destined for greatness. This man was designed for greatness. This man was purposed for greatness. Keith was born into a Jewish home, and his talent at a very young age superseded his years. In fact, Keith Green was signed to a 5-record deal by age 12 on Decca Records. Age 12, he had a 5-record deal. Time magazine said he's going to be the next heartthrob of the nation. He's going to be the next teen fad for everyone. He was, I don't even like to say this, but he was destined to be the Justin Bieber of his time. But he was overshadowed by the Donny Osmond of his time. Yeah. And Donny Osmond overshadowed him to a point that all the record deals in the world wouldn't help Keith Green. And he drifted. And he lost his way. And he started playing nightclubs too young of an age that he shouldn't have been there. He started playing parties, and he got into the 70s residue left over from the 60s drug culture. He got into the hippie movement. He got into the LSD movement. He got into the anything you can try movement. He tried to be Buddhist for a while. He tried to be Jewish for a while. He tried to be a rock star for a while. And he couldn't find anything. He studied philosophy at age 18. He was reading Nietzsche and philosophical works, and he couldn't find anything that would help him pull his life together. And then one day, one of his bandmates said to him, Keith, you have tried everything. Have you thought about trying church? Now, that's an odd thing to say to a Jewish hippie. Keith is like, you mean like a Christian church? And the guy is like, yeah, I'm not going to be at my church. I'm going to be away, but why don't you just go try my church? This is the power, by the way, of inviting people to church. Because Keith Green went to church. In his very first time at church, when the pastor asked, is there anyone who wants to follow Jesus? Is there anyone who wants to give their heart to Jesus? Keith probably really didn't know much about who Jesus was. But Keith and his new bride, Melody, both gave their life to Jesus. And they were changed instantly. They gave up their drugs. They gave up their Eastern philosophy. They gave up everything when rock music wouldn't pan out for Keith. He got the conviction that maybe God wanted something different from his music. And he penned these words: I found it hard to believe that someone like you could care for me. But you put this song in my heart. And that song made Keith Green overnight such a success that when Keith's name came up, people said, Donny Osmond who? He started selling out auditoriums and arenas all over Southern California. And he wasn't singing rock and roll pieces. Well, they might have been, but he was singing Christian songs. He was leading people to Jesus. People would come to a Keith Green's concert to hear music, and they would find Jesus. They would fall down and surrender their lives to Jesus Christ at an arena concert. He could have been like a Billy Graham of music. People came and they came and they came, and they just kept giving their life to Keith. Keith went from not being able to afford his mortgage one day to having more money than he knew what to do with. Now, generally, folks, stick with me here. Generally, folks, what happens to celebrities when they get too much money? They don't pay their taxes. What else happens to them? Oh, the devil gets a hold of them, right? You know what got a hold of Keith Green? The love of Jesus. He could afford his mortgage. He could afford his mortgage on the house beside him, and he could afford the mortgage on the house behind him. And Keith randomly started bringing pregnant women into the house so they wouldn't get abortions. He randomly, coming home from his concert, would see a homeless person and say, do you need food? Get in. He randomly would pick drug addicts out of the shelter and say, I know a better way. I know a better thing to consume. I know who can put a song in your heart. And this picture on the screen is one phase of a collection of people that Keith collected up, impacted, gave jobs to, became his roadies, became his promotional team. They became the people who took care of his fan mail. He built an entourage, not to glorify his stardom, but he built an entourage to glorify his God. But then he started going to church because he's a Christian now. And he's like, something's not quite there. Something's not quite right. And he penned one of my favorite songs, which this sermon is titled after, Asleep in the Light. Now, this song, they're his words, not mine, so you can't take them as a statement of condemnation on the church, at least not from me. But here are just a few. It's a very long song. Here's just a few of the words from Asleep in the Light. Do you see all of the people sinking down? Are you going to let them drown? How can you be so numb not to care if they come? You close your eyes and pretend the job is done. He goes on to say, but he, meaning Jesus, cries. He weeps. He bleeds. And he cares for your needs. But you just lay back, soaking it in. He went on to write, oh, can you see? Can you see? It's such sin. He brings them right to your door. But you left him, capital H, Christ, out on the street. What he means is God could bring the unbeliever. God could bring the prostitute. God could bring the drug addict. God could bring the homeless person. Would you notice? Or would they even find Jesus? Or is Jesus even there? He goes on to say this. The world is asleep. What is the world? Asleep. Do we believe that as Adventists? Oh, come on, there's got to be an Adventist in here someplace. The world is asleep in the what? In the dark. But the church, it cannot fight because it's asleep in the light. Oh, snap, she says. Commentary from the front pew. Oh, snap. Again, these are not your pastor's words. These words are written by a hippie over 50 years ago. The world is asleep in the dark. But the church, it just can't fight because it's asleep in the light. And the last lyric I'll share from this song. Oh, Jesus rose from the grave. But the church, this is where the old snap comes. But the church can't even what? Can't even get out of bed. You're not the first group. You're not the first group to have this problem. You're not the first group to wonder, in what ways did this idea apply to me? In fact, you might be in very good company because there was another group who had a problem about sleeping in the light. And their names was Peter, John, and James. And I know the story takes place at night, but they were in the light. They were in a light that is greater than the sun. They're in a light that is greater than a fluorescent light bulb. They're in a light that's greater than any fire. They're in the presence of the Son of God himself. And he had charged them with a mission. He had charged them with a purpose. He had charged them with a direction. He had just asked them to do his bidding, to do his ministry, to fulfill his purpose. And in this case, it was simply to pray. They were in the presence of the one who lit the sun that creates for us the light. They fell asleep in the light. Mark 14, verse 32. Peter has just sworn to Jesus. Listen to me. Peter has just sworn to Jesus. No matter what happens when we get up and leave this communion table, no matter what. Remember, we left the communion table, right? We had communion. And Peter had just sworn when we get up and we leave this communion table, I swear to you, Jesus, I will not depart from you. I will die pray rather than depart from you. But here, just a few verses later, in Mark 14, verse 32, he went to the place called Gethsemane, and he said to the disciples, sit here while I what? Pray. And sliding down to 34, and he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful. Remain here and do what? Watch. And this is where we get all those hymns. This is where we get all those sayings. This is where we get all those gospel songs. Pray and watch. Jesus simply asked them to pray and watch. Kind of like the Seventh-day Adventist church. Don't predict when Jesus is going to return. Pray and watch. Peter had promised Jesus he would die rather than let him be taken. King James says, my soul is very vexed, even unto death. You know that verse? This is the ESV version, but the King James is a little bit more forceful. My soul is vexed, even unto death. I am under enough anxiety to kill me. I am about to flip out if I am not with God. I am about to break, Jesus is saying. I am about to collapse. I am about to have a coronary, to put it in the vernacular. I am about to lose it because I know what's ahead of me. So just watch for me. Just pray for me. And going a little further, he fell on the ground and he prayed that if it was possible, the hour might what? Pass from him. What is Jesus going to do? What does he want to have pass from him? He's crying out to his Father, and he's saying, look, if there's any other way to save these people, if there's any other way to save these people, let's do that one. Jesus is at his most vulnerable minute. Jesus is at his weakest moment. Jesus needs more than anything for his church to care. Jesus needs more than anything for his church to pay attention. That's the watch. Jesus needs more than anything for the church not to be asleep and to pray. Because Jesus knows there's no way out unless he becomes the substitute. But he's hoping if they pray, he's hoping if they show any strength at all, he's hoping that God would maybe say there might be another way. But it's like Keith said, he cries. He weeps. He bleeds so that he can care for your needs. He cried out to Abba. In the Aramaic, it's daddy. He cried out for his daddy to rescue him. He cried out. He sweat blood, we're told. He cried, he wept, he bleed, so that he could fulfill our needs. Watch and pray. Peter, don't go to sleep. Watch and pray. Verse 36, and he said, Abba, that is Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. Yet, not what I will, but what you will. I want you to exegete that with me for a minute. I want you to think about that for me for a minute. Jesus is telling you which his will is. And Jesus is telling you he's close to the place where his will might not be the Father's will. And he's sensing that that could go the wrong way. After all, he is sympathetic to our needs. After all, he is made like is an important word, ourselves, right? Our natures. He's weak, he's frail, he's exhausted. He knows what's ahead of him. And he's like, look, if there's any other way, I would rather that, but I don't want to break your will, Father. I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want to walk away from what you've called me to do. So not even if I bleed, not even if I weep, not even, no, I must die for their need. And in verse 37, he came to see if they were praying for him. And he found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not even care about me for 1 hour? Could you not just think about your needs for 1 hour? Do you, Peter, who promised to die for me rather than desert me, can you not give me the next 20 years? Can you not give me the next 30 years? Can you just give me the next hour, Peter? I mean, you promised me everything. You promised me you would die for me. You promised you would never let anyone take me. But here I am in my greatest need. I am sweating blood for you, Peter. And you don't have 1 hour for me? Just 1 hour, Peter. All I need is 1 hour, Peter. All I need is 1 hour. Oh, I'm fearful. I'm fearful to parse out, to average out. I'm fearful to build spreadsheets. I'm fearful over 52 weeks in a year if we put everybody's service to Jesus, everybody's worship to Jesus in that. I don't want to do that. Because I'm fearful that the multiplication of that data sheet, that equation, that formula, when you multiply it by the amount of members in this church, or worse yet, by the amount of people who have worshiped in our place, I'm worried that we would find, if we averaged everything out, some people give 5 hours a week. Some people don't give 5 minutes a month. Would Jesus say we're asleep? Asleep in the night. Now, my faithful refresh group, my Wednesday night group, which is a place you can come and worship God midweek, you should really come. They know we recently taught on the parable of the 10 virgins and the midnight cry. So I'm sure they are not surprised to find the church asleep. I'm sure they're not even surprised to find the church asleep right before Jesus returns. Now, I saved one little piece for you. I'm going to inject it right here because this is a good Seventh-day Adventist church, right? Come on. When Keith Green became this big rock star, selling out stadiums and buying up houses to turn them into shelters. Do you know what he named his ministry? Last Day Ministry. He believed the church was asleep right before Jesus Christ was to return. That's almost 50 years ago. What about us? Continuing along in verse 38, Jesus says to Peter, John, and James, that inner circle, that core people, this is his cornerstone, which he depends on. This is his rock, which he depends on. These are the ones he trusts most. Watch and pray, that you may not enter into temptation. Oh, I know, solid rock, that the spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. I know, in other words, your intentions are good. I know your desire is right. I know your want is real. But it's not your intentions. It's not your desire. It's not even your want that is going to reach the world in these last days. That's why I said maybe we should change mission statement to mission action. It's your action. After all, did Paul not call us to be not just hearers, but doers of the word? Pray, because I know your flesh is weak. I know your spirit's sincere. I know you want to do what's right, but I need you to do what's right, because not only did Keith Green call his ministry Last Days Ministry, not only do we believe we live in the last days ministry, but this literally is the last days of Jesus Christ. He's about to die. And he's got his inner circle, his closest people, and he's saying, if there was ever a moment I need you not to go to sleep, if there was ever a moment I needed to be able to depend on my church, that moment is now. In the last days, Seventh-day Adventist Church, in the last days. I know the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Verse 40. And again he came and he found them. Oh, no. No. He found them what? Sleep. I mean, Jesus got so rough, he's almost a pastor. Oh, wait, he was a pastor, wasn't he? Jesus knows what it's like to preach your heart out in a sermon, and people promise that that's the way they're going, but by next week they can't remember what they promised to. Don't feel too bad. His inner core couldn't go a few minutes without forgetting what they promised to. For their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. Again, he found them asleep. But surely they fell asleep once. They fell asleep twice. Surely, having been warned twice by the master that he needs them now. Surely now, when he goes and he prays, he will find them awake, right? He will find them watching. He will find them holding the guard. Because surely, if the pastor preaches you one sermon about mission and you don't respond, you will respond to the second sermon about mission, right? But here's what verse 41 says, the first part. And he came to them which time? The third time. And he said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Hold on. Are you still sleeping and are you still They didn't even bother getting up the second time. They're just like my kid when you call him to get up for school. And you're like, Jose, are you awake? I'm awake, Daddy. So you come back the third time, and he didn't even move. That's them. It's enough, Jesus says to them. It's enough. Don't worry. Don't let me disrupt your beauty sleep. Don't let me disrupt the important things you got going on. It's enough. I'm not going to ask you again. Have you said that to your kids? The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of sinners. It's too late. I'm going into the hands of sinners. Don't you lose this. He was praying to his Father for any sign at all that the disciples didn't need him to die. He was praying for any sign at all that they had any strength, any fortitude at all. He's like, enough. You've proven my Father's point. You need me. Let's go. For now I must die. Rise. Let us be going. See? The betrayer, Judas, is at hand. The time was up. For Keith, that's exactly what he told his record company. He told his record company, the time is up. He walked into Sparrow Records and he said, I can't wait for the church to wake up. He was funding orphanages now, not just having people into his house. He was funding orphanages overseas. He had a whole property in Texas bought with a plane and a landing strip, which became his headquarters. And he went into his record company and he said, I want you to rip up my contract. And they said, if we rip up your contract, we won't be able to pay you. And he says, I don't want money. I want to follow Jesus. He says, it's wrong for me to charge for the gospel. And they said, if you don't charge for the gospel, how will you keep making records? He mortgaged his house and the properties he had purchased. He funded his record himself. He used his fan snail mail back in the day. And he told all of his fans his records were free. Just to write him and enclose whatever they wanted to pay for it, whatever they wanted to give a donation to his ministry for. He did the same thing in stadiums and arenas when he went to play concerts. He said, no one buys tickets to Keith Green concerts. We just take up love offerings. Because that's how ministry was done. It should be how much you love Jesus and how much you want to see his work done. Do you know that they predicted his career would crash? He made more money on those albums than he did before. And he put all of that money into the ministry. Keith Green gave everything to Jesus, including his life. Which is why he's the story of the power of almost. He could have been bigger than Bruce Springsteen. He was definitely on the way. He could have been bigger than Elton John. He was definitely on the way. He was the first breakout rock and roll Christian performance artist. He broke all of the records. He made the fatal mistake that too many rock and rollers make. They get on planes. I'm telling Marvin he's never allowed on a plane. Musicians should not get on plane. You with me? Not only did he die in that plane, but a whole nother family died in that plane. Not only did a whole nother family die in that plane, his son and his daughter died in that plane. And his pregnant wife was left. Last thing he said to her was, if anything happens on this flight, name our daughter Rebecca. And she's like, how do you know you're not going to have a son? He said, well, if you have a son, you know what to call him, Keith. He had a daughter. Last days ministry, still thriving. Last days ministry, still funding orphanages all over the world. Last days ministry, you can go to their website. I was there yesterday. Still bringing drug addicts. Still bringing homeless people. Still bringing them into the grace of Jesus Christ. What about us? Do you see all the people sinking down? Are you going to let them drown? Or are we just like Peter? Are we just like James? Are we just like John? And we don't even have an hour to give to our God. Got good news for you. Peter, James, and John gave their life just like Keith to their God. Yes, they were asleep in the light, but they did not stay asleep. You and I are here as a living testimony of what Peter, James, and John did. Listen to me, church. What they did was share the gospel in a way that it made it to you. Maybe you can't give 1 hour. And quite frankly, it's no secret, some of us can't. You can choose today. You can make a covenant with God today. You can make a promise with God today. You can give your whole life to God. And your life can keep on giving whenever it's over. Marvin's going to lead us in his rendition of Keith's, my favorite Keith Green song. Do you see all the people sinking down? Don't you care? Don't you care? Are you gonna let them drown? How can you be so numb not to care if they come? You close your eyes and pretend the job's done. Oh, bless me, Lord, bless me, Lord. You know it's all I ever hear. No one hates, no one hurts, no one even sheds a tear. But he cries, he weeps, he bleeds, and he cares for your needs. And you just lay back and keep soaking it in. Oh, can't you see it's such a sin? 'Cause he brings people to your door. You turn them away as you smile and say, God bless you, be at peace, and all heaven just weeps.
house. Jesus came to your door, and you left them out in the streets. Open up, and give yourself away. You see the need, you hear the cries, so how can you delay? God's calling and you're the one, but like Jonah you run. He told you to speak, but you keep holding it in. Oh, can't you see it's such a sin? The world is sleeping in the dark, that the church just can't fight, 'cause it's asleep in the night. How can you be so dead when you've all been well fed?
The problem with the Christian church is it's too well fed. The problem with the Christian church is church has become about what I go to get. The problem with the Christian church is if the message is not what I want to hear, I don't have to go. The problem with the Christian church is that we have God scheduled on the right day, but we've not even given him our heart. We've not given him our service. Look, there has to be a point, I've been preaching this for a while, there has to be a point, hear me, there has to be a point when the gospel is more than me being saved. There has to be a point when the gospel is more than the stardom that you can become and the greatness that Jesus can make you. There has to be a point, church, when the gospel is about those who are perishing. Jesus says to us this morning, Peter, James, and John, don't you have 1 hour for me? Don't you have 1 hour for me? Let me tell you, if you come to worship to get something, that's not even your hour. Don't you have 1 hour to serve your Lord? Don't you have 1 hour to help at the church? Don't you have 1 hour to be involved in the mission? Don't you have 1 hour? Because if you do, I'm just looking out, we've probably got 120 man hours instead of my 60 or 70. What could we do together if the church is not asleep in the light? Have a card. Some of you need to serve, and there's a place for that on that card. Some of you need to serve more. You can write that on your card. Some of you just really need to follow Jesus. You need to stop just coming to church and start following Jesus. You understand the difference today, right? That I want to follow Jesus part on the card is for you. It's for not. It means that there's going to be hardship. It means there's going to be struggle. It means you might be in a plane that goes down. It means that you have to give your all. But that's following Jesus. And there's some of you that need to symbolize that with baptism because you've not done that. You have your card. Jesus says to you, look what I did with Peter. Look what I did with James. Look what I did with John. Look what I did with Keith, a drugged out hippie Jew in California who brought the light to the world. So bright that 50 years after his death, it still burns. Marvin, give us a little bit more while they decide with their cards what they're going to do.
How can you be so numb not to care if they come? You close your eyes and pretend the job is done. You close your eyes and pretend. Don't close your eyes, don't pretend the job is done. Oh, don't close your eyes, don't pretend. Don't close your eyes, don't pretend. Don't close your eyes, don't pretend the job is done.
Dear Heavenly Father, I just claim 1 hour. I just claim 1 hour from everybody who's giving their heart to you now. That 1 hour may come this week, that 1 hour may come next week, that 1 hour may come in 3-hour increments. It may come in 1 day service, maybe at a workers' bee, maybe at the homeless shelter, maybe at the nursing home, maybe coming and being a part of the foster and adoption agency that works out of our own building that many of us have not even met yet. That 1 hour may come in just handing out flyers around the community when it's time. That 1 hour, Father, it may come just knocking on doors with Brother Saul and asking if people need prayer. That hour may come in many different ways. We need deacons, Father. We need sound people, Father. We need social media people, Father. We need people to care about the forgotten corners of ministry that you have been blessing us in and that we have been ignoring. Father, I thank you that even when we've not been faithful, 18,000 people who watch our videos. Father, what could you do if you awoke us? What could you do if we gave our whole life to you? Father, 1 hour always turns into the dedication of Peter, Paul, John, James, Mark, all of the apostles. Give us that 1 hour of faith that lasts a life. In Jesus' name, amen.
Sing hallelujah,
Hallelujah.
hallelujah,
Hallelujah.
hallelujah.